Welcome to the Have More Fun podcast. In this episode, I talk with Lori Lara about our superpower of intuition, the MeToo movement, and how to help our friends and daughters give themselves permission to be powerful.
Our heart is for our kids, so when they struggle or they're hurt at all, nervous about first day of school, right? We're like, oh, we're with you. I remember my first day of school. I need to get off this ride. This is not my ride.
Especially if you have like 2, 3, 4 kids, you're on 4 different rides plus your
Disneyland.
own.
Yeah, it's haunted Disneyland.
Yeah.
yeah. And I got the fast pass to all the rides. Yeah. Where I feel like God was just like, he was helping me borrow on the love I had for my kids to realize that's how he feels about me.
Before we jump in, I want to give a quick disclaimer that the content in this podcast might be triggering if you've experienced trauma. Also, you might not want to listen with little ears around, as we do cover some sensitive subjects. I tell stories for a living. Stories about my life, stories about people I meet, or the funny things that happen to me on a regular basis. But then there are the stories that I hold closer. Stories that feel more fragile, that demand to be held with a tenderness as to honor the reality of the people who live them. Like the story of my friend who, when she was 11, walked to the hardware store in the middle of her small town, where she spent her babysitting money to buy a screwdriver and a deadbolt to keep her older brother out of her room at night. Or the story of my friend who woke up in a stranger's bed one morning in her early 20s with no knowledge of the night before, not because she had drank too much, but because she had been drugged. She was so humiliated that she never told anyone until just a few years ago that it even happened, because she didn't want anyone to judge her, and she blamed herself for being in the situation in the first place. And the alarming thing is that there is nothing unusual about these stories. They're the everyday experiences of virtually every woman I know, and yet such stories rarely get told, until recently. The story sharing started last October when the New York Times first broke the story of accusations of sexual harassment against Harvey Weinstein. But the dam broke 10 days later when the actress Alyssa Milano tweeted asking for women who have been sexually harassed or assaulted to write "Me Too" as a reply to her tweet. Within 24 hours, the hashtag MeToo had been used over 12 million times on Facebook. And now, as so many months have gone by, the numbers keep growing as women tell the stories of men who use their power to overwhelm or coerce them. I don't know any woman who is surprised by any of these stories, which is why I am so moved by the work Lori Lara is doing. She started Strong Girls Self-Defense 2 years ago, after recognizing the need to help young girls realize their own power so that they can stand up for themselves when placed in situations where they need to use their voices. And not only that, she helps them avoid dangerous situations altogether. And what Lori has found is that her work with young girls is also giving their moms and grandmas a voice as well. So to share more about how we can give ourselves permission to be powerful, here is my friend and sister, Lori Lara. Hello, friends. It's Mandy, and I'm sitting on a blue couch in my office with the amazing Lori Lara, who also happens to be my sister-in-law, who I'm very proud of. And she flew in last night from California, so I am so excited to have a conversation with her. And Lori, you have done such amazing work in your own life, but also with young girls. And I'm constantly inspired by the stories that you share about the life transformation that's been going on through your classes. Before we jump into that, let's talk about the state of our culture right now, which is kind of blowing my mind a little bit. Not only with all of the Harvey Weinstein stuff, but the hashtag MeToo, right? This is so fascinating to me how when I look on social media, there are so many women who are telling really significant stories that they've encountered over the course of their lives of being a woman. And I think the thing that fascinates me most about this whole deal is I have this lingering question of like, how did we get here? And how have we been quiet for so long? How has this been acceptable to not talk about and to kind of just let happen with very little conversation?
Yeah, well, you know, depending on the statistic that we hear, right, 1 in 4, 1 in 5, 1 in 3 girls And it's happening to boys too. But, Department of Justice does this annual survey where they call people's home, they ask them about crime, and rape and sexual assault are two of the things that they measure. But those are people who are reporting. So I think all of this has been always happening. I mean, the hashtag #MeToo, every time I saw one of my friends post that, it broke my heart a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
We know it's happening. I know in my own personal experiences growing up, abuse of power has been here since mankind. And so we're seeing it manifested. The problem with the downside to technology is that people are coming forward with super painful, real experiences, kind of in the Coliseum, where everybody is sharing their opinion and everybody has a judgment about it. So as these girls and people are coming forward, for instance, in the Hollywood celebrity community, and they're talking about painful, real things that happen to them, it's probably one of the most vulnerable moments of their life. And just like in families, when people come forward, if things are happening in families, the mass denial comes as backlash. So at the moment you need the most support is when people get criticized. So that's the part for me that's tricky, is I believe all of this has been happening all along. Abuse of power has been there all along. But now people are talking about it, which is so good, because in that comes this support system, but also comes these great moments of, well, I'm sure she asked for it. Or if she's going to be an actress, she knew what she was getting into. Everybody knows the casting couch. It's so cliche. It's so common. The problem is it's not okay. It's never been okay. I'm just glad people are talking about it. But I think it's super important that people can get the support that they need, but not be tied into everyone else's denial or opinions.
Totally.
We weren't there. I wasn't there when these actresses were experiencing those things. I don't know the truth of it. I don't know what's their opinion, his opinion, all these people who are coming forward. But I do know that pain needs to be addressed. And I'm super proud of everybody that comes forward to talk about it, from friends that I know and actresses I don't know. We need to keep talking about it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I was talking with a friend of mine recently, and she was telling me that in watching all of these news stories and like the constant barrage of women sharing their stories, that she's been triggered in a really unique way that she didn't even realize. And she was like, I haven't been able to put words around it, but it brought up memories for her that she hadn't thought about in probably 15 years. And it was even hard for her to mention that she was being triggered in that way. She's like, why is this bothering me 15 years later? And so you talk a lot about how there's things that we can do when we're feeling triggered. But also, it was really impactful for me to hear that a lot of times when we as women start having kids, that we start getting memories or things come up for us at that point in our lives for various reasons, but it's very normal.
Yes.
And to kind of just normalize that, that's a really pivotal point in our lives.
Yeah. When I was first, when my trauma was coming to the surface and my boys were younger, it came at the most inconvenient time. I didn't know I was being triggered. I didn't even know that language. I wouldn't have even been able to tell you what was going on. All I knew is in situations with my kids, I just felt this intense need to protect and this strange feeling in my stomach and this nervousness, and I didn't even know how to name it. So when I entered therapy and started learning the lingo of recovery and talking about what happened, I remember my counselor telling me, this is super common, that when women have children, that when their kids hit the age that they were in, when they were either abused or had a painful experience, that pain that got frozen, which is what happens in trauma when it's not processed, all of that energy, anxiety, uncomfortableness, whatever it is that person was experiencing in that moment of trauma gets frozen. And it stays in your body, it stays in your mind, it stays in your emotion. And unless it gets processed out, which we know so much more about now, it stays in there and then experiences layer upon layer. And depending on how many traumas a person has gone through, will kind of increase that trigger or that feeling. So I didn't realize it was super common. And I was actually relieved to know, okay, so I'm not going crazy, or I just didn't think I could manage that amount of feeling that I was having for my kids. I'm like, I'm going to be that crazy mom who's constantly scanning people to see if they would molest my kids or things like that. So being triggered is super common. Not everybody has been sexually abused. Not everybody has gone through like extreme trauma, but we all have painful experiences that when our kids go through them, we end up attaching that feeling.
Even if it's being bullied or
Absolutely.
having mean things said about us. I mean, there's all sorts of ways that we can be triggered by things, right?
Yes. I mean, every experience our kids go through, our heart is for our kids. So when they struggle or they're hurt at all, nervous about first day of school, right? We're like, oh, we're with you. I remember my first day of school. So we're constantly transferring to our experience into our kids' experience, which isn't helpful to our kids. It is in terms of we're with you, we'll guide you through. But when we start spilling over our experiences into our kids' experiences, that we actually exacerbate their experience. So it's good to identify, but to not transfer everything in.
Is there like a really practical tip you have for how not to do that? I know it's so like...
You know, a lot of it's just being aware.
Okay.
I mean, there's being that connected to yourself where you know, okay, I'm feeling this feeling, not just being unconscious. Most of us walk around unconscious to the pain that we have, right? We're not 10 years old anymore. So that thing that happened when we were 10, we don't even realize is still living in us. So when we are getting triggered and you're doing that work in your life to process it so you can get healing, it's recognizing it. Oh, okay, where do I feel it? For me, I had to learn to identify it in my body. I would get a funny feeling in my chest or my stomach, and I'd be able to give language to it. Okay, I'm triggered. I'm feeling this. This isn't what's happening right now. This was the past, but I need to pay attention to it. So that helps become the observer. Instead of in it, you kind of take a step back and even get curious. Okay, this is really interesting. Where is this coming from? And because it's not on the top of our mind all the time, and in fact, a lot of these things are buried in our subconscious, which is not some metaphysical woohoo kind of thing. It really is in there. It's in our subconscious. It's not on our day-to-day mind, but it's affecting us and driving us to make decisions. So recognizing it is number one. Holding on to yourself. Just breathe. Okay, it's going to be okay. I see what's happening with me. I'm going to be okay. And then being able to ask for help and get help if it's something that's really interfering. You don't have to have a breakdown like I did to be able to have to deal with stuff from your past, and be clear so that you can have the compassion that you needed to help your child in a certain circumstance, but not transfer all your stuff onto them.
I even find myself like in dealing with my own anxiety, I have this little mantra that I repeat to myself, like, I am safe. I am safe. I'm safe. Like when I start to feel it rising in my chest. And for some reason, that is the message that I need to remind myself of. So even having just that little mantra can sometimes help.
Yes. And there's going through the process of recovery for me, they talked about this inner child work, which seemed to me to be very almost like anti-Christian. Seemed like this strange voodoo practice of going for your inner child. But I researched it a lot. And part of being able to heal wounds from what's happening inside is going back for yourself. There are practices to do that through quieting your mind and picturing yourself as a child. And it's one of the most powerful recovery tools that I found is having those quiet moments where just picturing myself as a child, a lot of grief came to the surface because I knew the preciousness of my children. That was easy. But to picture myself as that child, there was a lot of grief that I had never dealt with. And going back for myself, actually picturing myself, mothering myself like I mother my children was incredibly healing and grounding. And also when our kids struggle or they go through things, I tell my friends and we talk about it all the time. I'm like, get off their ride. This is not my ride. I have my own ride. And I find that I go up and down and feeling all of it. And for somebody who's a super feeler like I am, it's like, I just don't want to feel so much. This is so hard. If they're having a struggle, I'm struggling. And when they're doing great, I feel great. And I think that's common and I think that's empathy. But it was like, I'm going to, they say don't drown in their ocean. I'm like, I need a life raft. I don't know how to do that. But your mantra of I'm okay and all that, for me, it's like, okay, I need to get off this ride. This is not my ride.
Especially if you have like 2, 3, 4 kids, you're on 4 different rides plus your
Disneyland.
own. Yeah.
Yeah, it's haunted Disneyland.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I got the fast pass to all the rides. Yeah. And it's hard.
So in talking about the cultural climate and all of the hashtag MeToo and all of the stories that women are sharing, this is something that is real for you. Like you have experienced these types of stories firsthand. Will you share just a little bit about that?
Yes. So I have 2 stories to kind of illustrate my experience. I got a phone call from a mom. Her voice was shaking. I could tell she had been crying, and she was trying to not cry while she was talking to me. She had heard about my classes. Her daughter's friends had been taking my self-defense class and the mentoring class, knew that I talked about social media, talked about vulnerabilities that girls have, and also teaching them, what do you do if someone's choking you, kind of thing. So she called me. She said, I need to come observe your classes. She's super conservative, does not want just anybody teaching the kids. And what I teach is really, you have to have a lot of trust for somebody to teach your daughter these things, because you got to know that someone is not going to tell them the wrong thing or crack open some things that they're not able to handle, kind of thing. So I said, come out and observe a class. So it just happened to be that the class that she came to was one where I was talking to my students about social media. And we were having a conversation. We were in circle time, and I was talking about, the dangers of it happening all around us. And you don't have to be that girl, right, in air quotes, that bad girl, and I don't think there are bad girls. There are hurt girls, but those kinds of girls where they can't relate. This is happening here. It's happening to girls just like you. And I look out of the corner of my eye, and I can see this mom she's just destroyed. She's crying over there in the corner watching this class. And so I thought, this is really interesting. I knew she was triggered by something. So my class ended. We were in between another class coming in, and she said, my daughter, it had just happened weeks before, almost got on a plane to meet a guy that she'd just met on the internet 2 weeks before. So she tells me this story of her daughter. She had been gaming online and met this guy in these chat rooms, and then he ended up telling her to get a Kick account, which is like this, kind of like a Snapchat in that it's an app and you can communicate more privately. So she knew she wasn't supposed to do that. So she kind of got that feeling, that intuition, don't do this, but she made that choice. She felt like she knew him. So for 2 weeks they were communicating and developed this friendship. He's supposed to be this 16-year-old across the country. She's a nurturer. She's a caring person. They became friends. And then he told her one day after a couple of weeks, I'm going to kill myself if you don't come out. I'm having trouble. I don't have anybody in my life, kind of thing. So she's left with this situation where she's now has this friendship with someone her parents know nothing about on an app that she knows that she's not supposed to be able to have. And she got there through a game that they knew she did have. So there was this kind of frog in the water, step by step by step. So she got her dad's credit card and she bought a plane ticket. And because she's got to save her friend, right? She's like, I got to be there for my friend. And I can't tell my parents they're not going to let me go. And my friend is going to kill himself. So next morning, she's hours away from leaving. Her mom walked by the family printer and there was a paper jam. So she cleared it and out comes this plane confirmation ticket. She knows nothing about. Talked to her daughter. Police got involved. Internet crimes. They confiscated the computer, her phone, and all that. And it ended up being that there were 3 arrests made. This 16-year-old who she thought was her friend was actually luring her through his uncle who had this sex trafficking operation. So there's this massive, real fear, trauma situation happening for this mom. She's desperate. How did this happen? I did everything right. She's a homeschooling mom. I homeschooled. I did everything right. We're plugged in. We have family time. Talk to my kids about everything. How could this happen to my daughter? So I ended up doing a class and actually teaching her, the daughter who's so dear to my heart. And there are times, Mandy, where when I close my eyes and really think about where she would have been gone. She would have been a news story. She would have been, somebody, again, to warn your children about what can happen. She would have been trafficked. So being able to kind of pull that apart and to be able to be part of the healing afterward has been so powerful in my life because I know the brokenness. Now, I wasn't trafficked, but I know the brokenness of what can happen and how girls are vulnerable and they don't even realize it. And the thing about this girl that I have to say is that she does not feel like a victim. You know,
isn't that so fascinating?
She doesn't feel like a victim. Her mom still in tears, right? She can't believe this was her daughter.
That it was so close.
So close.
Under her own roof.
Under her own roof. What could have happened, right? So her mom's traumatized. Her family's traumatized. Everybody's traumatized through this. But the girl does not feel traumatized. She feels like her friend is still at risk. She still feels like this is a relationship that she had. This is a friendship.
Yeah.
So in her brain, this doesn't fit.
Yeah.
She knows intellectually that arrests were made. She knows intellectually that she was being lured, but she doesn't feel like she was being lured.
Her heart is there's still that connection.
And this is what happens oftentimes when kids are abused or people are abused. Most abuse happens with people we know. It's not the stranger on the internet, although that's happening more and more because people have access. But it happens in terms of a relationship. So it's confusing. Girls don't know what to do with it because here's this person that I love, or here's this person who does all these wonderful things for me, or is my coach, or is my teacher, or everybody loves, and yet these things are happening and they don't know what to do with it. So talking about it is the key to being able to have these things. So that's one story. Another story, 13-year-old girl on a driveway late at night, sleepover situation, right? We talk about sleepovers a lot in my family. I'm like, I will never let my kids sleep over. But, you know, she had gone with her friend at the mall. This is before cell phones, and her friend had met a guy at the mall. So they're both 13. This guy was 17, and so she's going over her friend's house for sleepover, doesn't realize that her friend has arranged for this boy and his other 17-year-old friend to meet them at the end of their driveway at night. So parents are asleep. This girl is now at her friend's house, has no idea. 17-year-old boys. You know, I can picture the scene, and it makes me livid, right? 17-year-old boys. Yeah. So they're at night. So she's walking down this driveway. How did she get here, right? She's going over her friend's house, and now she's in the situation where she's meeting two older boys in the dark, and nobody knows this is happening. Parents are asleep. It's dark outside. So the mall guy that her friend had met, they kind of took off, and there's this other boy there with her, and she's standing there, and there's a dark look in his eyes, and she doesn't know what to do about this. She's in way over her head, and before she knows it, she's on her back, and he's on her, and he's assaulting her, and she's screaming, and she's kicking, and she's fighting, and he's putting his hands up her shirt and down her pants, and she's in panic mode. Nobody knows she's in this struggle. And so that story, you know, she gets away. She doesn't tell her friend. The boys go away. The event is over, and she goes to sleep. Her parents don't know this happened. The parents at the house that she's at doesn't know this happened. Her friend never knows it's happened. And she carried that with her for decades, this experience. That pain, that what does this mean, this lack of boundaries, and didn't even see it coming. And I was that 13-year-old. So that was just one of many, many instances that happened to me personally with boys, with older men, in situations that I didn't even process till everything kind of came to the surface for me. So yeah, girls are...
And it's so hard at 13 to have the information to know this is an unsafe experience, right? You don't have the context essentially to put around it.
Right.
When you're 13 or...
No concept, no experience. You know, all I have to do is picture a 13-year-old girl and a 17-year-old boy, and I'm like, give me my sword.
Totally.
Because I see it's that abuse of power. You know, this boy had all the power, and this girl had none. And so, yeah, it was a bad situation, but she didn't know the formula.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I have a daughter who is 12 going on 13 and another daughter who's 10. And I have this tendency to overshare with them, right? So I want to talk about all the things and I want to like warn them about everything. And I think that tendency is because I want to help them to not have to learn the hard way, like so many of us women have. So you put together a course for young girls, and so much of it comes from your own healing. And I love that you know firsthand these experiences so that girls feel like you are a safe, trusted person, right? And you have walked through some hard things, and so they know that you are a reliable source. And I think the unique thing about you is that you have this really deep understanding of how to help women and girls regain their power and a sense of their own intuition, and to learn to trust that again. But the thing that really strikes me is that how, when you start the class, you focus on helping them believe that they are worth protecting. Mm-hmm. Will you tell me why that's important? Like, why do you feel like you need to start there?
Yeah. Well, the first lesson in self-defense is teaching my students they're worth protecting, because we only protect the things that we value. I'm in front of my students and I say, okay, if I have to illustrate this, if I have garbage, I just eat a candy bar, whatever, and I throw the wrapper on the ground, and somebody comes to take that wrapper, I'm probably not going to fight them for it. Well, do me a favor and go ahead and take that trash wherever you want to take that trash. I don't value that, and then I just have the girls close their eyes and I tell them, think about something that you would protect. Oftentimes it's their pets. They love their dogs, or they love their baby sister, or a parent or something. And I said, okay, picture that. Okay, now that's on this side. So the wrapper's over here. What you value is over here. What would you do if somebody were going to come and hurt that person or that animal? And you can just see they're in a different mental state. They're in like, you better not touch my dog, or you better not touch my sister. So we innately protect the things that we value. Sadly, many of us grow up with these experiences that lie to us, in these traumas and in these experiences. And you don't have to be abused to deal with it, but it's, what does society say who you are? You're only valuable if you're pleasing people, your teachers, your parents. We get these mixed messages about who we are and what we value. We become performers. We become, we're not attached to our value. In terms of, we know the value of things that we love, but most of us do not see ourselves that way. I remember one night when our oldest son was really young, and I was tucking him in to bed, and I was scratching his back, and I'd read a story, and he was kind of drifting off, and I was just telling him how much we loved him, and how much God loved him, and how there was nothing he could ever do in his life that could diminish that at all. We just love him no matter what. And as I'm scratching his back and I see his breath becoming more relaxed, and he's drifting off into this kind of like bubble wrap of love that we moms can give our kids, and I just felt that for him. And I rolled over on my back and I just started to cry. And I was crying so much that I was like shaking, and I was concerned I was going to kind of jolt him out of what I just sent him into. But my sadness was because I knew that was true for him. I had zero doubt of how precious he was, but I didn't feel that for myself. And it was part of these precursor things that were stirring in me, where I feel like God was just like, he was helping me borrow on the love I had for my kids to realize that's how he feels about me, and to kind of reattach what had been severed in me. And although it was so painful, it was actually really beautiful, and it was the bridge that brought me to be able to connect to my value. So most of us don't have that feeling about ourselves, right? I mean, that would be really healthy to be like walking around feeling that
I am loved, I am worthy,
right.
I'm enough.
Right, don't mess with me. But it's super important for girls to value themselves, not for what they do, not for how pleased people are with them. This Instagram culture where it's about followers and likes, and they're developing psychologically in a very disconnected fashion. If they're on their devices all the time and they're not just real time like you and I, we're with each other, we're talking, we're connecting. So there's this filtered life that is making this chasm between who someone was created to be, who God created them to be. I tell my students, God did not create you to be an Instagram star so people can rate your body in a bikini.
Totally.
Is that your purpose? Do you think that's your purpose? But so I'm trying to help them realize what they're doing and where they're getting their feelings about themselves. Is it because they do well in school? Is it because their parents are pleased?
Or boys think they're pretty, or what? All of those messages that we are told that are important.
Right, right. So self-defense is both mental and emotional and physical. And my program, when I was just teaching martial arts, which I love doing, kicking and hitting and all that stuff, it was very incomplete, because if a girl does not know her value, she is going to be vulnerable, not just to online predators, but to boys at her school, to the opinions of others. She will not be able to protect herself and make healthy choices if she does not first know her value. So that's why I start there. And it's actually quite emotional. Some of the exercises that I bring the girls through, where they really kind of come face to face through that, through story and imagery and all of that, you start to see the light go on, and it's really exciting.
And even as adult women, I feel like we need to hear that message, right? It's like there are phases where you need to be reminded you are worthy, you are enough, you are powerful, you are loved, you are someone worth protecting.
Yes.
Or worth fighting for, your own mental health, your own emotional well-being. And that really translates for our kids as well, because they see it.
And there's nothing like coming face to face with what we really think our value is until we have kids. It brings up all that stuff, because we want our kids to protect themselves. I get parents call me and they're scared. All over the news, these stories of girls being lured and boys and sending naked pictures and all of that. And parents, want their kids to be protected. Well, we cannot legislate safety. It's just not going to happen. And parents know that. So as their kids get older and they want to push away, right? The teen years come and the kids want their space. It comes at a time where parents don't want to give them space because they're so scared. I don't want you to go to the mall, right? Because I heard this story that there's creepy guys getting phone numbers and girls sending naked pictures. How does that happen? So parents feel powerless and kids feel smothered. And so then they go underground, and so they're not learning how to protect themselves. So my goal is to help parents to relax, to actually become less afraid, because they know that their daughters are connected to their awareness, their intuition. What do I do if somebody's following me in the mall? Give them those practical tools so that they transfer the responsibility of safety to their children. And it's not just when they're 18 and go away to college. That is not enough. There's so many things girls need to learn. And boys too. This stuff happens to boys too. My program just happens to be with girls. But women being triggered into their value, women being triggered into, I want you to be safe, but then also doing the very things that put themselves at risk. There's that dichotomy that needs to be bridged.
Totally. Joe and I have friends here in Denver who work with girls who have been trafficked, and he was telling us that so often young girls will be approached by men who are looking for vulnerability, looking to groom them, looking, to see if there's some way that they can kind of get in their head. And he said, all it takes is for a young girl to be like, ew, you're gross. And they're done. Yeah. Like, they're not interested, because they see that she has a self-confidence enough to be like, I'm not interested in your attention whatsoever. And I thought, what like a teeny tiny little shift. And so we're always telling our girls, like, someone comes up to you, they want to get your phone number, they're trying to like tell you you're beautiful, you're just like, no, ew, you're gross. Yeah. And it's like this little tiny tool that they have, right, to give them permission to be like, I don't need to please you. I don't need to make you happy. I don't need to make you feel okay. And even for myself, like, I was traveling a couple weeks ago, walking through the airport, and a guy who worked in the airport looked at me. He's like, you should smile. Why are you so grumpy this morning or something? I'm like, I don't owe you a smile, right? How often, even as grown women, do we feel like we owe someone something that we really don't? And so how do you tell women to kind of regain their power in that way?
Well, I think that's such a fabulous question, and it's something that is an issue with most people who want to be kind, right? We're taught to be polite. We're taught to be kind. We don't want to be rude. Young girls especially do not want to be rude. It's not a natural state, right? We tell our kids to be polite or look someone in the eyes, shake hands, things like that. So the problem is kids don't understand, and often adults don't either, when am I playing into someone and when am I not? For instance, I tell my students, you don't have to be nice. You do not have to be nice. One of my students came to class. This is actually one of my first classes, and she's 11 years old. So we're sitting in circle time because we start every class with circle time. We just kind of have a time of sharing, and I'm talking about, when people approach you, but I wanted to make it real, so I asked them, so has there ever been a time where you guys have been approached by anybody or asked you for directions or asked you to do something that you felt kind of uncomfortable? And her little hand shot up, and so she's sharing this story for the first time. She'd never talked about it before. She and her sister were riding bikes, and they were at some shopping mall area, like a grocery store with a little coffee shop kind of thing. And she said they were walking by this fast food place with their bikes, and this guy said, hey, can you watch my bike for me? I need to run into the fast food place. And so they're like, okay. So there they are, standing, holding this man. I said, well, how old was this guy? Probably in his 30s, she said. So I'm already mad, but I'm like, hide it, don't transfer how you're feeling right now, Coach Lori. So I just listened, and she said for the next 15 minutes, they stood there holding this guy's bike. And then all of a sudden, this group of other guys in their 30s, because there's like outdoor seating, come to the tables where they are, and they start sitting on the tables. They're not going inside this fast food place, but they're hanging out now with these two girls. And they're making conversation and trying to get their name, and so they started feeling uncomfortable. And then the guy comes out. She said they were there for like 15 minutes. And he comes out, and he didn't walk over to get his bike. He joined these guys. So they knew each other. And they start talking to them even more. And so she said she started feeling even more uncomfortable. So then they walked away, and they were trying to still have conversation with them. And I said, okay, so let's talk about this, right? Let's talk about what happened. So with no judgment, when you first saw this guy and he asked you to watch his bike, how did you feel? She's like, well, I felt really uncomfortable. Okay, so let's stop there. And we talk as a group, how would you feel? Because it's so much easier to see it when it's not your story. Right, all the other girls, their mouths are open. They're like, "Why did you watch his bike?" Right,
but in the moment, you feel like, "Oh, I should."
Right,
I should.
So I said, "What was going on?" So you felt that feeling, because we talk about intuition. When you get that feeling, where do you feel it? Some people feel in the chest, in the stomach, down their arms. They get the hair on the back of their neck. Trying to connect when you get that signal. She's like, "I felt really uncomfortable, but I felt like it was nice for me to do that." And I said, okay. And then when those guys came out, how did you feel? Well, I felt really uncomfortable. They were talking to me, and I couldn't believe that they knew each other. And so she's able to retell and to gain wisdom from this experience. All I was doing was prompting her. She had all the information already inside of her. She knew what she was feeling. She knew something was wrong. And then thankfully, she was able to, at some point, she and her sister walk away from that situation. Who knows what would have happened? Maybe they just were creepy people. Maybe they have very bad boundaries. They just want kids to watch their bike. So we talk as a group. You don't need to watch anybody's bike. You don't need to give anybody, no adult needs you to give directions. Everybody's got a phone with GPS. They can ask another adult. So it's kind of giving them permission to be rude, what they feel is rude.
Right.
And I said, but it's really not rude. I said, if you were somewhere and you asked someone to watch their bike and they couldn't, would you be mad at that person? Well, no, I wouldn't be mad. Okay. So think about it. When someone's trying to get you to do something that you don't want to do and you feel like you're being rude, you have to think what's wrong with this other person. And it's a totally different way of looking at the situation. So permission to be rude, or permission to not have to caretake other people, is paramount to being able to protect yourself.
That's so good.
Yeah.
And you call that your God-given superpower, your intuition?
Our intuition, yeah. My friend Anna Maria, we talk about intuition, and sometimes it seems like an obscure topic, and people think, oh, what's your intuition? That's some kind of esoteric concept. But it's not. It's a God-given superpower to protect ourselves, to have information, to be able to not just protect ourselves against danger, but have information to make better choices in life. Like I met this person, right? As a woman, you meet someone, and maybe you guys are going to be friends, but you kind of get this feeling that maybe she's not trustworthy in some fashion. Okay, well, that's a signal you're getting. It's a signal that you need to listen to. So I was watching Oprah one day, and this was many, many years ago, and this author was on Gavin Becker, The Gift of Fear. Have you read that book?
Yes.
Okay.
So powerful.
So The Gift of Fear gave me every validation I had known my entire life that was subconscious to me, gave me permission to listen to that intuition. He talks, I recommend that book, talking about, he interviewed people who were victims of crimes, and he said oftentimes, a woman had been raped or something had happened. Okay, what happened? Did you have any feeling? And oftentimes it's, no, it came out of the blue. Everybody thinks a lot of things happen out of the blue. Whereas statistically, 90% of crime is preventable. That's law enforcement saying that. So by listening to our intuition. So he said, if I'm quiet enough and I'm listening to this girl talk about this experience that happened or this person, he says, there will come this information. Well, when he approached the car, I did kind of have a funny feeling. And I went against it, kind of like we were talking about being polite. What would make a girl get into an elevator with somebody who she's got this really bad feeling, this guy, the door's open, right? And the guy's in there, and she's like, I'm not going to live in fear, and I'm sure he's a nice guy, and we feel bad, and we start dismissing our intuition because it's impolite, or maybe it's socially expensive. Maybe it's a friend's dad. Maybe it's a coach, maybe a teacher, maybe a pastor, maybe somebody who nobody wants to talk about this feeling that they're having. But being able to be connected to your intuition is the single most powerful self-defense tool anybody can have. Well, first of all, awareness, picking up our head from the phone,
not looking
right?
at your phone.
Not looking at the phone all day, being
Yeah.
aware. And being able to observe the world around us and read people. We're constantly reading situations and then being able to get those signals. That's what helps us protect ourselves. My friend Anna Maria, in teaching intuition, it's a practice. Listening to our intuition, doing what it's telling us to do sometimes is really hard because you have to do and say things that the crowd or people around you, it's very unpopular. But my friend Anna Maria tells her kids that their intuition is their inner watchdog. And it's when you get that feeling, it's barking. It's telling you there's something here you need to pay attention to. So good. I love that visual.
That's really good.
So I kind of borrowed on that and told my kids that's what that is.
So you've seen so many families with all different family dynamics come through your classes. Is there a common denominator of families who are navigating these types of situations really well, or these conversations?
Mm-hmm. I think so. From my students and just my own research and my own healing, families that talk about hard stuff openly. It's really easy to be, as a parent, right? We're teachers. We're giving information. We're saying, be careful of this, or here's the situation. Okay, I just heard this news story, and this girl was in the mall, so don't be that girl. Okay, have fun, right? Don't die.
Yeah.
That's kind of like parents are scared. So that's a common denominator. The students that I see and the families that come to me are families where they are scared because they love their kids and they want them to be safe. And secondly, they want their kids to know how to protect themselves. They want their daughters to be safe. And they can't follow them 24/7 or hire a private investigator, which I am sure would be a solution that if people could afford, right?
Yeah.
Right? But they know they can't do that. So they're having conversations. And what I do is after a class and I talk about a particular concept, I'll email the parents. Here's what we talked about in class. So when your daughter comes home, you got to continue the conversation. And one of the things that I talk about with my students, it's very hard for them to accept at first. So I share a little bit about my story, about mistakes that I've made. I said, you are going to make mistakes. You're learning. We're all making mistakes. I promise you, your parents have made mistakes you know nothing about, and it's probably none of your business, but just know you're not the only one who's trying to get it right, who makes mistakes. The question is, what do you do when you've made an unsafe choice? For instance, you go to the mall, you meet a guy, you get your Snapchat, whatever connection, or you share information with each other. You know it's wrong. Okay, now what do I do? And I asked the girls, what do you think stops kids from talking to their parents when they've made an unsafe choice? Or and, their hands all go, well, they'd kill us, I'd be grounded for life. They wouldn't trust me again. So there's this opposing forces of parents that want their kids to be safe and kids who are trying to work it out. What does that look like to be safe? And they're making mistakes. They are making contact with people who maybe they shouldn't have, and now they don't feel like they can back out of it, and they don't have anywhere to go. So for me, it's opening that conversation, it's building that bridge. And for parents, I say the most important conversation you're going to have with your daughters about self-defense is telling them you want to hear whatever is happening. You know they're going to make mistakes. You made mistakes. Maybe share one or two that are age appropriate. My kids love to hear about my story when I went on a shoplifting spree when I was a teenager. They just like, Mom, tell the story again of when you were shoplifting. Yeah. And, I have no shame about it now. I mean, I did. I got caught up in it, and how my dad handled it was great. But for like a whole summer, my friends and I, we would go to the mall, and it started one little step at a time. It's stealing gum, and I didn't want to do it, but I went along with the crowd, and then it got to be makeup, and then it was clothes. And before you knew it, I lost track of what I was doing until I got stopped by security in a department store. And then the reality of what I had been doing all along came to the front, and I was like, whoa, like I am dead. Like my parents are going to be devastated. So, it was a situation where, how my dad handled it was perfect. He said, how long has this been happening? This is not in character for you, Lori. How could you have done this? My mom was crying and upset and didn't want to talk to me, and I had just totally leveled her. But he said, okay, what are all the things that you've done? So he had me go around and he had me collect all the things that I had stolen.
Oh my goodness.
I'm going into my closet. I'm wearing the outfit I had stolen that day. We stole matching outfits. It was so dumb. So anyway, I went back to the mall and had to return everything. And he didn't ground me. He said, this is over now, right? He had the inner strength to know what I needed in that moment to be able to make that right for myself. And that was making it right by these retailers. And so I felt like he was safe. I wouldn't have confessed to him, but how he handled that made me get closer to my dad, and that maybe I could tell him other things. Because he was upset, but he was kind of a little bit unfazed. Yeah. So, when I tell my students, you're going to make unsafe choices. What are you going to do about that? You have to be brave. You have to be brave when you've made unsafe choices. You have to be brave enough to say, I got lost in this. I made contact with this person, and I'm uncomfortable, and I got to tell you this. And what the kids don't realize is that as they do that, the parents will trust more. Most parents. Some parents are not responsible with this, but it actually closes the gap, because it's like, okay, my kid is going to be able to come tell me. So being able to talk to a safe adult, talk to a friend, hey, this is something that I've done, I need help, or I need a way out of this, to be able to have that way out. Totally. And then I email the parents and I say, look, if your kid comes to you and confesses something, please be ready. Please be ready to have that conversation with her. And they know that I'm going to have it ahead of time, but I had this one mom contact me and tell me her daughter just like opened up and had talked about these things that she had done. And I think it was like scary movies. She was watching scary movies. Oh, goodness. Something that is not shoplifting, right? But she had gone to a sleepover and watched scary movies, but it was weighing on her. It was weighing on her conscience. She knew she was disobeying her mom, and she had no way to confess or to build that bridge. And that is what makes girls susceptible, to predators. They're very patient and they're very conniving. Okay, they'll make contact, then they'll get the contact. Well, send me a picture. Okay, and then before you know it, in a 12-hour span, this young teenager has sent naked pictures of herself to this guy she just met. How does that happen? Well, it happens because she's terrified to tell her parents that she made contact in the beginning. I'm going to hurt your parents, or I'm going to tell your parents, and your life is over. Well, you and I know your life isn't over. Right. You can heal from anything. You are never too far gone. You are never too bad. Nothing you've ever done isn't redeemable. And so they need that permission to confess and that permission to have grace and to learn, permission to learn in this life.
Totally. My parents always used to tell us growing up that there's nothing we can't handle. Oh. There's nothing we can't fix. There's nothing that's too big that we can't figure out together.
Wow.
And that was so powerful because it was like, okay, they're going to help me figure out anything that comes along. And that's been,
wow.
It still sticks with me, as an almost 40-year-old woman, that I can call my mom up and be like, Mom, I don't know how to figure this out. I need help.
Wow.
So
what a gift.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's very uncommon.
Yeah.
Very uncommon.
Yeah.
And so then people go into hiding.
Well, and I think so often too, as parents, we make our kids stuff about us, right? So they mess up and it's like, oh, I'm a terrible parent. And then we have this narrative in our head that's all about us.
Right.
And so if we can just quiet that and say, this is not a reflection on me or my parenting. This is my child, learning to be themselves. And so how can I help them? How can I serve them well in this process? That
separateness is so healthy. When they're babies, they feel, there's a lot of this, I think, unconscious entitlement, not from a bratty entitlement, but like an ownership. Like, these are my children. This is my son, my daughter. And it's true in that they belong in our family, but they are a separate being. Like, God created this person, and this person who is your daughter is separate from you. And she's gonna learn from your mistakes. She's gonna learn from the good things you pass on. And then she's got her own style. She's got her own path that if we can encourage, what I see is when girls feel confident to be different, when they know they're separate from their parents and they have that freedom to make those choices, there is a strength that will carry them in life. If their first time that they're on their own making their own choices and individuating is when they go away to college, that is a problem. But there are things that parents can do every step along the way to really respect that separateness and to say this. It's all about choices, right? Freedom to make choices. Well, if we don't make room for mistakes and we don't make room for there to be learning, our kids are not going to develop properly.
What's the best advice you never got?
Oh gosh, I would say trust your gut. Trust your gut no matter what. Hey, that rhymes. You have to listen to your gut. My gut might be telling me something different from yours. And what I tell my students is, you might be getting a signal from somebody that somebody's unsafe. You're getting information. Somebody else may not get that same information, but your job is to listen to that. So you have to listen to your gut and be open to learning. It may not be, with women who have bad experiences, painful experiences, might be triggered by different people who possibly maybe remind them physically of their perpetrator, or there's a certain scenario they feel uncomfortable with. They're getting those signals, and it may not be accurate about this person, but they still need to listen to it. And the worst thing people could do is go, oh, don't feel that way. I feel really uncomfortable with this person. Oh, he's fine. Like the story of one of my students where she was going into a store after hearing about intuition, and she's walking into a store and she's like, Coach Lori, I saw this guy at the corner of my eye. There was something about him that I didn't feel right about. And she mentioned it to her mom as they're walking into the store. And her mom said, oh, honey, he's just a worker. He's fine. He's just a worker. So they go about their shopping. And as they come out, maybe 10 or 15 minutes later, this same guy is being arrested. And she's seeing him handcuffed and being put in the back of a police officer. And she had her hands way up in the air, and she's like, I knew it. I knew there was something going on. And I said, right, you didn't know what it was, and you still don't know what it was. But apparently the police agree with you too. He's at least, being hauled away. So talking to the mom about that, what was happening for you? For her, it's like, she was busy. I got to get in there and get out, and I got to cook dinner and all that kind of stuff. So she didn't realize that she was kind of teaching her daughter to not listen, right? Instead of saying in that situation, oh, you feel uncomfortable? What do you think's going on about that? And just continue the conversation. Maybe not stay there, but at least validate what's going on.
So for anyone listening right now, are there just 3 practical takeaways that you might offer?
It's never too late to do the work to deal with your stuff is number one. It's never too late. You are never too far gone, too damaged, too broken to heal. to become stronger, to learn the concepts that I'm teaching about being, strong and, empowered in life and learning to be uncomfortable and all of that. It's never too late. So if you're a woman in your 30s or your 40s, or maybe you're a grandma, whatever is going on, it's never too late to heal. And nothing is too much for God to be able to come in and restore. And not just restore, I know it in my own life. Not only restore and heal in me, but then to be able to work that kind of healing in other people's life through me is full circle healing. It's just crazy. Like, God's crazy. It's like, are you kidding? Like, the brokenness that I had, the level and the depth of depression and PTSD that I'm in, for me to be sitting with you right now and for me to be in front of girls is almost like a cosmic joke. Only God can do that work. I had to do my work, but he empowered me and helped me in the healing. And so that's just the crazy work of redemption. So it's never too late, never too bad. Learning to ask for help. Oh my gosh, as an independent girl,
why is that such a hard step for so many of us?
I think there are a couple of factors. I think number one, it's personality. I am by nature a helper. Like, it's not all dysfunction. Like, I really like helping people. It's what energizes me. I love to help. But for me, I had to learn how to ask for help. And for me, it had to do with vulnerability. I felt very uncomfortable receiving help. I was not practiced at receiving help. I didn't want to put anybody out, right?
Totally.
I want to make sure if you're really going to do something that you really want to do it, because I don't ever want you to do something you don't want to do, But if you're okay with it, then I can be okay. So it's kind of a practice of receiving help and not being perceived as a taker, right, or a user. Well, I had a friend who was wanting to cook for me one time when my back was out, and I said, no, it's okay. I don't need you to cook dinner. And she's like, no, I really want to. And I'm like, no, it's okay. We're going back and forth, and we're in front of other friends. And so she's like, Lori, you remember last week when you went to the doctor with me and when you took care of my dogs? She's listing all these things I had done. And I said, yeah. And she said, well, how did you feel when you did that? And I said, well, I felt really good. I wanted to do that. She said, well, when you don't let me help you, you are robbing me of the blessing of helping you. And it was like the heavens parted. Yeah. And I realized that I was actually robbing someone else of the joy that I love when I'm helping by not receiving that help. Wow. It was really
That's
powerful.
Good.
And lastly, I would just say make room for good. Make room for good. Make room for good to happen. Be surprised by the goodness that's to come. There's so much fear. We worry about our kids and when they're babies and they have fevers and is this going to go into that? And there's a lot of worst case scenario going on. But we also, which I learned in therapy, is just really negative imagination. So also factor in, this could work out great, right?
Think of what could go right.
What could go right? We know it's true in other people's lives. We know the redemption that God does, right? All the biblical times. Well, he wants that for us too. So being able to make room for the good.
I love that. Are there any books or resources, if someone's interested and kind of wants to start reading more, where would you send them?
Well, besides the Bible, of course, because as a believer, that's where truth lies. That's where just over and over and over verses that I memorized when I was a kid that I knew in my head, but now apply so deeply, the wisdom and the holiness and the message that God has for me in this moment, just constantly, I hear it best through worship music. When people sing scripture versus just reading, all of that. But besides that, when it comes to intuition, Gavin de Becker, The Gift of Fear, it's a hard book. It's a triggering book. So if somebody has dealt with being a victim, has been a victim, you just got to know that. But I learned so much about intuition and just how he writes and all that gift. And then he also has Protect the Gift, which has to do about raising children and teaching them about intuition. When it comes to valuing yourself, One of the most profound books I read was called Abba's Child by Brennan.
Oh, such a great book.
I was at this swim club with the boys. They were young. I was in the mess of trauma coming up. Panic attacks in the closet, screaming in my pillow while the kids are playing in the other room, and then having to make lunch for them. You go from trauma to chicken nuggets, and how the messiness of having a breakdown with small kids. And someone had given me this book. I don't even remember who it was. I'd never heard of Brennan Manning. And so I had taken the kids, they're swimming, and I was just a mess. I probably hadn't showered in like 4 days, and the kids are swimming, and they're having fun, and I'm wanting to be there for them. And I'm reading this book, Abba's Child, and I'm bawling. I am bawling through his experiences of him coming to face with who he was to God and all of his addiction. He'd become an alcoholic on the street and all that. Touched me so deeply. So when it comes to like our value and our preciousness to God and wanting all those things for ourselves, Abba's Child would be that. And for self-development, I mean, The Road Less Traveled by Scott Peck was just eye-opening. Life is difficult. The first 3 words, life is difficult. The choices that we have. It's a very empowering book in that way. So those would be the
so
resources.
Good. And if you're in the car and you didn't get to write those down, you can check out the show notes, and we'll have links to all of those books. Lori, thank you so much. Where can people find you or contact you?
Probably through email is the best way. So just Lori@laralearning.com.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Lori@laralearning.com. Hey, thanks so much for listening. It would mean the world to me if you would take a minute to rate and write a review of this podcast. And make sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. All right.